The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this REMI guest webinar, Revitalizing Rockford, Economic Impacts of a Transformational Investment. This webinar is being conducted by Jason Holcomb, Director of Community Impact at Region 1 Planning Council, and Michael Dunn, Executive Director at Region 1 Planning Council. Region 1 Planning Council, or R1, is the regional planning organization across Northern Illinois, including Rockford, and addresses community health and development issues and more. This webinar is an extension of their excellent presentation at this year's REMI Users Conference, and we are very excited to have this presentation reached by a wider audience. At REMI, we provide economic modeling software that helps policymakers make more informed policy decisions in the fields of economic development, transportation, tax, equity, energy and environment, and more. To learn more about how we can assist in your work, please reach out to us at info@remi.com. We'd be glad to schedule a call with you. If at any point during this presentation you have a question, please enter it into the question box. Time permitting, I will moderate these questions to Michael and Jason following the conclusion of their presentation. Also, shortly after the presentation, a link will be sent to your email that contains a copy of the slides and a recording of the presentation. If you have any questions from these materials, please reach out to info@remi.com, and if appropriate, we will connect you with the presenters. Thank you again, everyone, for joining, and take it away, Michael.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Michael Dunn, Executive Director of Region 1 Planning Council. And Brian, thank you for the introduction. As a Planning Council, for those who are not familiar with Northern Illinois, we cover 5 counties of Northern Illinois, roughly 800,000 people. In a much smaller area, serve as the Metropolitan Planning Organization for USDOT, and for a larger area, the Economic Development District for U.S. Department of Commerce. One of the tools we use to serve our local government members is REMI, and we use it for the most part to understand what economic impact of new development might be. And so if there's anybody listening to the presentation today that's from our area, I want to apologize in advance for probably focusing more on an external audience and better introducing the city of Rockford and the region. So with that, I think, Jason, you're in control of the slide deck. If you could move to the next slide. Great. So the project that we used REMI for was a brownfield development that was known as the Barbara Coleman campus. Well, next slide will show you geographically kind of how it was situated. Rockford's a river town, traditional manufacturing river town, and it was right on a river. And we had a number of facilities that were owned by corporations doing manufacturing all the way up into the early 90s, in this case 2001 for this campus. And since the turn of the 21st century, the city of Rockford's done a phenomenal job of going campus to campus, site from site, and investing in them and configuring them into a different use. So much so that we have a strong amenity culture now in our downtown versus what it was set up in the 50s and 60s to do, and that was manufacturing. One site was converted into an indoor sports complex for youth sports tournaments. Another one recently been converted to an Embassy Suites hotel. But this one was a large one. Originally it was 17 acres. I think at today's development size, it's 26. But I had gone through a lot of ups and downs in the development world, having out-of-state developers come in and look to see what could be done with those 26 acres. At one point, the community college was looking to move and build an advanced training center there. There had been other residential and commercial uses. At one time, one of our health systems was looking to put a large footprint down in this neighborhood. But geographically speaking, it was super convenient as it's just south of the Central Business District on an Illinois highway that connects that downtown Central Business District, not with just some really vibrant neighborhoods, but with our large international airport right at where US 20 and Illinois 2 hit, large freight operations and cargo operations there, and it's a job center for the region, as well as the highway system connecting with US 20, later I-90 and I-39. It's just a great location, really good views on the river, but highly contaminated. And to go back a step, Howard Coleman, who was kind of our Thomas Edison, had developed a lot of patents, and that's what drove industry at the site. They had worked on one of the first fuel gauges for an automobile, one of the first garage door openers for the automobile, and built their control systems program out from there. Right around prior to 9/11, it was made clear that the factory and the operation was going to shut down and be shuttered. And shortly thereafter, the city of Rockford took ownership of that property and put a lot of time and money working in partnership with the federal EPA, with a lot of brownfield grant funding, block by block, building by building, issued analysis and then further remediation on the site. So much so that after a number of demolitions and remediating the structures that were there, it's a clean site. And that was at a great cost to City of Rockford taxpayers and great cost to the federal government. Aggressive, securing a lot of federal money to do that. And so if we can move to the next slide, please. We were confronted, again, as I mentioned, a lot of development opportunities in the past, namely the community college, but even ones prior to that, that have fallen through. I would opine that part of that was just the size of the site, how much there was to rehabilitate and how much square footage there was to basically build out. And so a developer from Wisconsin came with a plan that spoke about a $420 million investment. And the addition, as we're going to see in the site plan, of new parking structures to accommodate the parking demand. And so this was the site plan that was submitted. In the front, where you can see letter A, those are outlots. That's kind of part of the reason why it went from 17 to 26 acres. The site along the river where you see the letter M is another reason for that. And the thought was that this should be a residential campus. It should focus on the housing need that we do have. We have a serious housing need in the area, I think like all areas of the country do. But with the job creation that's coming to our area, both in our automotive industry cluster, but also in our logistics corridor and our distribution center down at the airport, that we're speccing out over the next 10 years, another REMI exercise of what our future employment base might be and how are we going to house them and how are we going to locate the workforce of tomorrow. And so I think the developer here definitely put forward a mixed use proposal and does show elements of commercial uses, but without question the focus was on residential. And you can see in the outlots along in front of Main Street, it was pushed to a later phase, but a townhome ground up development. Buildings L, M, and N, I believe anything that's got a solid color K were earmarked for new construction ground up, again on some area that had already been demoed, about to be demoed and were remediated. And then all the buildings cross-hatched were existing structures built like Fort Knox, had a lot of value and simply needed to be rebuilt. And then also modeling some public area and common area, amenity area, especially that park in the lower left along the Rock River, and then some parking structures. So as it was presented to us, and there's another great bird's eye of the site, as it was just presented to us as a regional planning council, the city of Rockford provided us all the data that they wanted incorporated in the model and their best estimate at what inputs would feed the model that Jason will talk about. Covered this slide already, but $1.5 million in new construction, over 900 multifamily units, 130. I've seen 100 to 130,000 square foot of commercial space, plus other uses for the site. And this came to us about a year ago when we were asked to put it in our model and to explain kind of the thinking on why we did it and why we were needed. Was that the city owned the property, right? And so we do have a workforce housing shortage. We have a housing shortage, period. Affordability is an issue, and this is located not only outside of downtown on a riverfront, but it's in areas that have typically seen a disinvestment or not equitable investment. And so I think there's a lot of intangibles on why a city of any size would want to invest in the site and provide an incentive package to the developer. But in this case, there was an additional hurdle, and that was the city owned the real estate. And so if a developer wasn't going to come in and redevelop it, at some point the city's going to have to demo everything that's remaining on the site. And I'm spitballing here, but I believe that figure was 18 million. And so prior to engaging the REMI model, the thought was, what has a higher utility? Coming in and spending $18 million to be left with basically vacant land that's not providing property tax base at all, or housing or anything else? Or is there a lower amount than the 18 million that can be, again, not up to us, up to our city who's the client, but is there a lower amount that we can provide the developer that actually saves the city money and allows there to be something there that can be taxed, something that does provide utility, not just for the neighborhood, but for a region. And so that was, I think, where the discussion was over a year ago when Jason was brought in. And I think if I go to the next slide, it's Jason's turn to take, oh, no, some cool renderings of what the finished product might be. And yeah, that left us with what the city gave us, right? The first two phases of construction, phase 1A, 1B, adaptive reuse of about 600,000 square feet, and then new parking structures with new commercial space. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason Holcomb, who led our efforts on this. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in today and taking interest in the project.
Thank you, Michael. Just to give you a little bit of background on the tool that we have the Transite module, and we also have recently added SEI to that, which I will speak to a little bit on the back end of this. Transite fits really well with our transportation functions here at the Planning Council, but we've also found some creative ways to use it for more of these development and redevelopment projects. And so I'll speak a little bit to that. We do have this for a 3-county area. The focus of this particular project was on 1 county within that area, which is Winnebago County. As Michael had mentioned, we had received some input information from the city of Rockford in working with the developer. What was the estimated investment amount of $420 million. Really tried to be thoughtful about how we put that into the model. And this is not unique only to this project, but in general, when we're looking at development projects, we're kind of thinking about outside of only the construction functions of the project, what are the potential uses of the space that's being developed? So in some cases, you're going to have construction dollars, maybe an early phase of a project, and then you're going to have maybe a different input. Let's say if it's a manufacturing facility that's being invested in, you're going to have a number for direct jobs that are created from that investment. So you have your construction costs you're putting in, and then maybe you have a certain number of direct jobs. In a case where a lot of the use of the project, the development is going to be residential, or it's going to be transportation improvements around the surrounding area, or you're going to have mixed use development that's going to also create some commercial and maybe even retail space. We've kind of tried to adapt to not only capture the construction outputs or the construction impacts, but also the uses impacts. So how the space will be used, what's that going to do for sales in those particular industries, and then what impacts are going to come from that. So when you look at the impacts, the inputs that we settled on for this project, we're looking at investment spending in residential, and then we're also looking at industry sales in office and commercial structures based on the mixed use development and all of the additional commercial space that was projected that will be created, and then also transportation structures, highways and streets as a function of industry sales, looking at those surrounding transportation improvements in that immediate development. And then we kind of are looking at what do we anticipate impacts to be, certainly looking at population, employment, and then really using that SEI module to disaggregate some of that into various socioeconomic categories like gender, race, education, and compensation. So I'll just speak quickly to the inputs because I don't have that detailed here in a visualization, but the phase one was mostly construction, and that was going to occur during 2024 mostly and into 2025. And then we had a phase two, or I think in this presentation was called phase 1B, which was looking at some additional commercial development over the ensuing years of 2027 through 2030. And so we were really, although a lot of times we're looking at that long-term 30-year impact for some of our projects, in this case, we were looking over the course of that immediate impact through 2030. So you'll see all of our visualizations here for our outputs were done just over that period of time where the investment is being made. And for each of these, we broke down our ultimate outputs and visualized them in two different ways. In one way, we're looking at real time, and in the other way, we're looking at accrued. And, you know, again, this is not unique just to this project, but what we've discovered when we run our analysis on many of these projects is that when you see that real-time data, so what you're seeing, for example, here in changes in population growth in real time, you're seeing what the projected population change is for each year independently. So in 2023, for example, there's a modest population increase of less than 200 people. And then in 2024, when the construction really starts going, you're seeing 400 people, okay? And I think it looks a little like a roller coaster. You have a lot of volatility in that when you see it in real time because you have phases of construction or phase of investment, and then maybe in between phases you see a little bit of a drop off, and then maybe an additional investment hits and you see another rise. So when we look at real-time data, we have to understand that volatility is oftentimes associated with phases of investment. I think what can be helpful for decision makers to see is what does that look like in an accrued overall impact. So yeah, we see the change over time. We see 1 year this is happening, the next year less is happening. But what does that look like by the end of this period of time? So when we look at accrued, we're taking that population increase for each year, and then any losses are being kind of calculated in, and then you're seeing what is the net over time as it's accruing. And so in 2030 for population, we see that there's going to be between 2,500 and 3,000 people projected for total population growth over that period of time. Same thing with employment. So we're looking at actual jobs that are projected to be created. You see this one, it looks kind of like on the left when you're looking at real time, you look like you're seeing maybe a stock market volatility or something, a day with a lot of change because it's associated with those phases of investment. You're seeing a big spike and then a big kind of really zero just means no population growth, right? You're not losing anyone, but you're just not gaining anyone in that particular year based on investment phases. When we look at that in an accrued way, we see that that population the population growth kind of maintains. You see some steady growth, and you see a little plateauing, and then you see some more steady growth, and we end up with an estimate of about 2,500 to 3,000 in jobs created, which was pretty consistent with what our population growth estimates were as well. If we then start to look into those SEI modules and look at, okay, so we know that roughly 2,500 plus jobs could be created through direct and indirect as a result of this investment. What types of jobs are those, or who gets employed in those positions? Here we see an SEI disaggregation by employment, or sorry, by education, and we'll see that a large majority of these jobs would be projected to be for not requiring a college degree. We do see that there are some bachelor level, college degree level jobs, but at a overall lower percentage than what you're anticipating for jobs that do not require a college degree. And that's the no bachelor's degree is in blue, and a bachelor's degree or above is in red. And then keep that in mind, because that's going to be important to think about when we understand this quintile income analysis as well. When you're thinking about, okay, so a lot of these jobs don't require a college degree, how well do they pay? So here we look at industry quintile. And so this is kind of an interesting one if you really go into the weeds of the methodology of the SEI module. You know, what is compensation by industry quintile? Well, what is an industry quintile? So how the SEI module breaks down income is into regionally calculated quintiles, and it's actually arranging or ordering all of the industries by compensation and then categorizing them into 5 different groups or quintiles. And so when you're looking at, let's say, the lowest 20%, which you see in purple, you're looking at industries that are in the lowest quintile of average compensation. So another way of saying that is lower paying jobs. And in the green, you would see the highest end of that. So again, it's average compensation by industry, but essentially what you're saying is it's likely that those are going to be higher paying jobs. What we see here is a lot of middle quintile jobs. So probably average income, median income type jobs. And if you think about most of those jobs not requiring a college degree, and then think about them paying in the middle quintile, you can kind of understand a little bit more what that's doing. Okay, so that might be considered a good value for what the education level is for the types of jobs that will be created in general. And then we're going to get into industry output. So across the industries that we were looking at specifically, we will say that in addition to that compensation increase, you will see that the industry output does exceed compensation. So there's going to be industry growth that happens as a result of this investment outside of compensation by itself. And so again, you kind of see some of the same shapes here. If we're looking at it in real time, you'll see a little bit of that volatility, the ups and downs with investment periods. But then if you look at that accrued over time, over that 7-year period, you're really expecting about an additional $350 million over time in additional industry output. We'll just pause here for questions and comments. If there's any questions about our model, please feel free. And Brian, I don't know if you've been taking any of those yet.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say thank you very much, Jason and Michael, for the great presentation. And also thank you to all who've attended. So we did have a couple questions come in, but I definitely encourage you, while we're kind of going over these 2 questions, to drop your question in the question box, and we will get to that. I also want to remind everyone that if you want to take a bit of a closer look at the graphs that they were showing, we will be sharing these slides through an email to you about an hour after the presentation concludes. So after you have a closer look, if you have any questions that come from that, definitely feel free to reach out to us at info@remi.com. And if you have an appropriate question, we'll be sure to connect you with Jason and Michael, as well as the recording will also be shared through that way as well. So we will get into these questions. So the first one is, have you looked into what industries those jobs were created in and how many of them were in construction specifically?
We did look at that. That wasn't part of our ultimate final report. We were looking at just overall industry output. Obviously, if you kind of get into REMI, you can then see the specific industries. I don't have that in front of me right now, but that is certainly something that we look at in general with our development projects. But as I kind of stated at the front end, though, we're thinking about that even as we're doing our inputs. What do we anticipate is construction specific investment that a lot of times might be more short term, and then what is the estimated impact, or what do you expect there's going to be outputs in terms of the uses of that development? Is it creating direct jobs? Is it creating space for, you know, commercial, residential use, and how is that going to ultimately translate into what those industries are that benefit? So we kind of try to think about that strategically on the front end when we are figuring out how to put our investments through the inputs.
Excellent. The next question talks about, have you looked into expanding public transit into the new developed area and what that would entail?
So I can take that. We have looked at that as an MPO. That corridor is under review currently in this planning year. There's current service on that Illinois State Route 2 currently. So the question is, how do we expand that? In what ways do we create a mobility hub for micromobility as part of the development? And what ways can transit district maybe come into the property slightly? Where is there a rideshare area with that many residents? Do we want to earmark a rideshare area out? And that's working with the developer and working with the city on certain best practices. In the future, that corridor could be a BRT corridor. So then it's like, well, as we map out where limited BRT stops might be, is this an area? And then finally, we do see close to nonstop passenger rail service coming back to Rockford directly to Chicago Union Station. So a lot of variables, right? You have a state highway that connects the international airport and US Highway 20 and those two other interstates with our downtown. That link is right there by the property. And so there's a number of transportation efforts and transportation strategies that are being employed. You have a brand new bridge at that riverfront that the state invested in roughly 7-8 years ago. We have a rails to trails bridge and a decommissioned rail line that also is just north of the property, and that's a cool facility linking bike path systems on both sides of the river. And again, you know, residents that are going to be living at this property on a higher proportion are going to choose maybe an alternative means of mobility versus just having a vehicle. The developer is putting in parking garages that initially will stay public. But I think, yeah, the transit piece is critical for a property like this when the residents are going to want to maybe work in downtown and not have to rely on a passenger vehicle. And then how do we get that last mile connection to the passenger rail terminal, which is north of there, to get people in and out of the Chicago suburbs?
Excellent. Thank you for that. The next question we received is, are the employment and output results for the city of Rockford or for the multi-county area?
They're for the Winnebago County, so one single county. That's, you know, we have a multi-county area, but we did this for one county, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, excellent. The next question was, does the model take into account the prevented cost over greenfield development, i.e. the savings on infrastructure expansion since roads and sewers are in place, or this area wouldn't require new fire department facilities. I kind of stumbled through that. I can read it again. That's my bad.
No,
Yeah, I can't. I don't think I could answer questions about the model. I think that might be a Remy professional question, but Michael, I'll let you take maybe.
Well, I think on a policy level, that is complemented with the model that Remy and Jason put together, right? On a policy level, whether it's housing on a block in a neighborhood, whether it's trying to do adaptive reuse of a commercial property, you always are going to consider the fact that you're not adding sprawl and you're doing infill brownfield development. I think that utilities already being in place. Again, it was a huge manufacturer, so you have close to the right sized utilities. There needs to be modernization of those services, but for the most part, you're not sprawling out into a farmland. And I would say on a policy level, the thought was that we want to build out residential as close to the central business district as possible, right? As I said in my intro, our road systems, we have a number of state highways coming into downtown Rockford. Our road systems, how land use was determined along what is a beautiful riverfront, was all dictated by a few families in town that own these corporations in the middle of the 20th century. And so our roads were built to handle a heavy movement of freight in and out of downtown, commuting patterns that have changed. And so I think in the 21st century, downtown Rockford is going to kind of reinvent itself as a place where people want to live and people want to enjoy a nice lifestyle. And so that requires a shift from a daytime population mentality to a nighttime population mentality, and how through even smart grid and resilient grids, you accommodate a heavier nighttime usage than perhaps a daytime usage. And then on the transportation mindset, what other alternative modes of transportation are people going to seek out? And so I think there's a lot of policy considerations that accompany the model that Jason and his team put together on, do we want to invest close to downtown and have as many nighttime residents as possible, or do we want to just keep building out on the interstate 6 miles away?
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for the thoughtful response. It looks like at this time, no further questions have come in. I do encourage you, if you do have any questions, again, please reach out to info@remy.com once you receive the slides and the recording. If you get a closer look at everything, if something comes up, please reach out to us and we'll connect you with the speakers. Again, I want to thank Jason and Michael for the excellent presentation, and thank you to everyone who joined. We hope you have a great day and a great week, and we hope to see you soon. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.